Walter Wonkite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
So what are you doing? Nothing? Why not?
I'm trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more. We've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is not much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiba grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show. On Lifestyle Radio.
There you go. All right. So this is the 420 radio show. We're live here at 420radio.ca. Say hello to Dana, everybody. Hi, Dana. How are you?
Hello, Dana.
You haven't been here in a while. Since it's been about a year, I think.
Sounds about right.
Is it just a year?
I think it's been about a year, maybe a little bit longer. I know that you've opened a few new things that we're going to talk about this evening. And I wish I could come out and visit them because they're my kind of places. You've got, what's the newest thing you just opened?
Well, I got a few different things going on here in Vancouver, but the Coca Leaf Cafe and Mushroom Dispensary, although we're celebrating our 1 year anniversary now, so it's not that new, but it's still 1 year is still pretty new, and things are still changing and improving here. But it's we've created a really unique space where you can access all kinds of different magical, beneficial plants that normally you can't. Such as coca leaves, which is normally known for making cocaine, but have a long tradition of chewing and drinking as tea, and we make those available here. We were the only place in North America you can come in and get a cup of coca leaf tea or get some coca leaf to chew.
And what kind of sensation is that? I've never tried it before.
Yeah, well, when you chew the leaf, and so it's been chewed and used by indigenous peoples there since long before Europeans got here, and really for thousands of years, and it has a lot of cultural and social and spiritual relevance. But you dry out the leaves a bit. You don't process it, just like cannabis. There's no extra processing involved. You just dry out the leaves. You put them in your cheek, and you don't really chew. It's more kind of like a sucking and squeezing motion to get the juice out with your teeth in your cheek. You add something alkaline, which can be as simple as baking soda. Different cultures down there, sometimes they'll use crushed seashells or maybe a quinoa ash or different things they found that have that alkalinity. It makes your cheek go numb. It gives you energy. Coca increases your oxygen flow, so it relaxes your muscles, but also stimulates your mind at the same time. They use it partly to treat altitude sickness because a lot of these cultures live in very high in the Andes Mountains where the air is very thin. And I've been there, and you feel weird in that environment because there's so little oxygen. Sometimes you kind of find yourself panting and breathing and almost feeling like you're drowning because you're not really getting enough oxygen. You have a cup of coca tea, you chew some coca leaf, and your body is able to deal with that environment way better. It's an instantaneous kind of a thing. You'll go from kind of feeling nauseous and headachy and weak, and suddenly you'll feel really good.
That's how I feel with mushrooms.
Yeah, well, it's, and some of these things could be used together in different ways, and certainly we make that available. But yeah, the coca tea, and people think coca and cocaine, but there's a lot of other alkaloids and things in there. Just like cannabis is much more than just THC, and you really get the proper benefit when you have all the different cannabinoids kind of working together. So coca is the same thing, right? Pure cocaine is quite different from chewing the leaf and having all the alkaloids together and ingesting it in this kind of more natural way. So we said we're the only place you can get that. We also have live coca plants for sale as well. Those are quite rare to see, and I think we're the only place in the world where you can come in and buy a coca plant off the shelf because you can't even do that in like Bolivia or Peru. So that's one of the things we do here, the Coca Leaf Cafe. But this place, we also have part of this is the mushroom dispensary, and we're make magic mushrooms available, psilocybin mushrooms. We have grow kits, but we also have microdoses and chocolates and dried mushrooms of several different varieties of psilocybin mushrooms for sale. That's also, we're not the only place in the city doing that now, but we're one of the pioneers, and certainly there's only a few, but I'm hoping that it proliferates in Vancouver and across Canada in the same way that marijuana dispensaries did through the late 90s and early 2000s, where we saw a lot of these places opening up. I think we're going to see a similar thing with mushrooms. So,
I agree.
That's not all we do here, but that's really part of what we do is these two main plant medicines.
I'm just at the we're all kind of just learning, obviously. Some of us more than others. I've been microdosing for going on a couple of years now. Paula at Gunjanistas got me into it. We started experimenting and like it's I tell people when they say, "Are you nuts?" I'm like, "Nah, man, it's kicked the depression right out of me." I'm walking down the street with a smile as opposed to get the fuck out of my way.
Microdosing is going to be huge. Like microdosing, it's not a perfect analogy, but I call it like it's kind of like the CBD of psychedelics, right? Because there's a lot of people who take CBD products who have no desire or are afraid of like a THC high, even though it's quite pleasant, but don't want that experience, but they'll use CBD. And I think we're going to see a lot of that happening. I sell micro doses to a lot of people who have no desire to take a trip, but they're getting really great benefit from these 10th of a trip kind of doses that you take, taken twice a week or once every 3 days or so. And a lot of these people are on antidepressants and don't want to be on antidepressants.
I stopped taking the antidepressants a few years ago. I only use for the head stuff, anyways. I only use cannabis and psilocybin, and but
they're prescribing antidepressants to treat COVID now.
Well, that's because people are getting depressed, probably. I'm sorry to laugh.
Yeah,
but,
and it has nothing to do with anything for the COVID, but...
Well, I mean, I can say that antidepressants, I think, tend to operate that they dampen down your negative emotions, but they also and your trauma. And
they
your
shut them off.
But in the process, they also dampen down your positive emotions too. And that the mushroom psilocybin psychedelic experience seems to be more about integrating these negative experiences or traumas or things into yourself and then moving past them and being able to not try to push them away, but kind of let them go through you, and that you can also then they increase your positive things. So you're not always dwelling on some negative thing. You're not so easily triggered. People report to me that somebody will say something rude to them or cut them off in traffic, and normally for the rest of the day they'd be thinking about it and they'd be angry and they'd be thinking of snappy comebacks and stuff. And when they microdose, they're still living their life and they're functional and they're doing their thing, but they let that kind of stuff go past them and they go, oh, maybe that guy was having a bad day. Sucks to be him. And they don't dwell on those kind of things. And so it seems to be really positive. And I think it's not really well studied, but I think there's a lot of potential in combining the bigger doses and the smaller doses. Because I find that when I take a bigger dose, I have epiphanies and insights about myself and the world. I can't really do work and stuff. I'm lost in kind of this other world. But when you microdose, you kind of remember those kind of insights and those benefits, but they're not overwhelming. So you're like, oh yeah, we're all connected, and oh yeah, I don't have to be triggered, and oh yeah, and it brings those things back. Because sometimes I think it could be hard to properly integrate all the epiphanies and benefits you get from a big trip back into your daily life. And you have this out-of-body experience and all these things happen, and then you've got to go back to the mundane world, and it's kind of hard sometimes to keep those things together. And I think microdosing regularly can help to kind of reinforce those benefits and those insights, and I'd like to see more studies on that.
You see, Mark Messier just made a big announcement that he's been using them, right?
Well, for traumatic brain injury and stuff, cannabinoids and psychedelics have a lot of potential too. And a lot of athletes are getting bounced around and get a lot of brain problems. And so I think that we're seeing more of that. But for so long, it's been forbidden, right? I mean, if you're a football player and you take CBD, that for a long time that would get you kicked out as a player, right? And so yeah, things are changing in that way, and it's good. I'm glad Messier talking about that.
We have we replay. I've got like 14 years of shows that replay on the station at 4:20 every day, AM and PM. And the one that was on just before us here was with Boo Williams and Sasha Lakovic before he passed away. And it was about brain injuries and stuff like that. Now, Boo's still doing it, obviously. He's around full force doing his CBD stuff. Unfortunately, Sasha passed away, but they were both using cannabis openly to combat their... Marcel, what were they calling it? The brain injury? I can't remember what they call it. There's an actual...
Oh, it's concussion syndrome.
Concussion syndrome.
It wasn't CTE, was it, Al?
What was that?
It wasn't CTE, was it?
I think that's what they call it. Like what you get when you have too many concussions.
Yes.
Right? Like boxers, a lot of football players
Yeah.
get this kind of stuff, and it can make your moods change. It can produce weird behaviors, and it's it's not good. And
It's
definitely,
a brain injury. I mean, even Mike Tyson said in an article a couple of weeks ago now, I think, that he'd be a different person back then if he was using cannabis like he uses it now, right?
It's something interesting about boxing, and that is actually boxing with gloves is actually worse for people in the long term than boxing with bare knuckles.
Really?
And when they had bare knuckle boxing, it looks a lot worse because you'll get a lot of cuts and blood on your face, and so but you can't punch somebody quite as hard with your bare hands because when you have a glove on, you can punch harder and more, and there's not blood, but your brain gets jostled around in your head way more from gloved boxing. And so the long-term harm, it looks nicer and it seems sort of more humane, but we're discovering now that it actually produces more harm in the long run. Wow. Your brain gets bonked around way more than it would with this is something I read somewhere I thought was interesting.
It makes sense, though. It makes sense because anyways, so there's lots of reasons to try these things. So you're out there in Vancouver, and you're taking a chance to make sure that people can medicate the way that they want to, which kudos to you, my friend. Okay, I've always respected what you're doing, Dana. Seriously, because you're taking a personal risk. Like so many did before you in the cannabis community. You were doing that as well, but there were so many, and you're one of the first in Canada that's like out there. You're doing the drug testing for all drugs, right?
Yeah, we can talk about that too in a minute.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing with this is really a form of civil disobedience, and it's something that we pioneered with cannabis over the years, and it really started with bong shops and seeds and medical marijuana, and then lounges and 420 events and all these kind of things. And what's happening with psychedelics now, I think, is going to really parallel that. And in the U.S., it was cities decriminalizing at the civic level and allowing medical dispensaries and things starting to happen. And now we're seeing that where Denver and other cities, many of which were the first ones to allow cannabis, are now decriminalizing psychedelic plants or mushrooms.
Do they want to decriminalize here in Toronto?
Same thing. Yeah, I think that will be excellent too. And I know that there's more therapy kind of happening, and I think that this idea of like putting medical in front of something really changes people's perceptions, right? Well, marijuana, I don't know about that, but medicinal marijuana, well, that's something. And then you start to see that it's all medicinal, and that if a healthy person, and a sick person, it can benefit everybody ultimately. And the same with psychedelics. Some people have more trauma and more issues to deal with. But we've all got trauma and issues and challenges, and we've all got these things to some degree in our lives. And so you don't need to be someone who's got PTSD or anxiety or severe depression to benefit from psychedelics, right? I will say I take pretty calculated risks. Like I'm definitely breaking a lot of drug laws here, but I would be very surprised if we got arrested here at our shop. We've got a pretty good thing going in Vancouver, and I try to judge my risks carefully and break the law in such a way that we can make positive change happen.
As somebody walks into the room.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of our staff. No, we're just, I'm in the back of the cafe now. So one of our workers just came and let me know he's starting to shift.
I hope that, like, I got a press in my living room. Things are changing. 10 years ago, when I started doing this 14 years ago, okay, just starting to get to know people and learn about what's going on in the community itself. There was glass blowing. There were guys who were pushing papers and bongs and stuff like that, and Mark's shops but that was it. And then the hemp shops opened up in Toronto, the big ones. What is it called? The Toronto Hemp Company, I think it is. And that was a place where you could go in and look around. And then the one on Queen Street, can't remember the name of them. They've been on the show too. Sorry.
Vapor Central or the shop?
No, it was down by Much Music.
Friendly Stranger.
Friendly Stranger, yeah. And look, yeah, and yet they've expanded so much that they've got legal shops, right? So it's
there's and we complain a lot about legalization and how there's a lot of flaws in it and issues with it, but it's also like the biggest civil rights movement or enhancement from the federal government, like since really Pierre Trudeau brought in the Charter of Rights, and Justin Trudeau stopped 60,000 marijuana arrests from happening every year. It's huge. I know a lot of people are happy with him about the restrictions around COVID and stuff, but in terms of cannabis, and in terms of many things, that's like a huge change, right? There was 60,000 give or take arrests every year for cannabis. Now it's down to like a very small number.
He really did do what
really
he
positive.
said he was going to do during his campaigns on the cannabis thing.
People, I'm not saying it's all perfect, and we could talk endlessly about all the flaws of legalization and the continued criminalization and monopolization and all this stuff. But we don't have a dictator, right? You got to like stick handle this stuff through a lot of different factors and stakeholders and stuff to get it through, and you got to make compromises and sacrifices that sometimes maybe you don't want to have to make. But
I'm not a supporter.
Thing, right?
I'm not a supporter. I'll be honest. I was in the interim, but just some of the silly things he's done. I don't know. I'm an NDP member actually. That doesn't mean I'm always happy with what the NDP is doing either. Right? Of course,
and we got to pick who to vote for is always a real challenge.
And that's a scary. It's a scary choice to have to make, especially for somebody in Canada who's never voted before but wants to make their point. And
our system probably has flaws too. But democracy is always
horrible voting
trying to
this
get
year.
30 million people or hundreds of million people to agree on something is, and so. But I mean, I just will say that I hope that mushrooms and psychedelics can kind of follow the similar path that cannabis legalization did, hopefully with a better set of regulations at the end. But I think it's going to happen a lot faster. It took a couple of decades from the 90s till took about 20, 30 years or so to really get to legalization from the early 90s. And I think it's going to be a 10-year process for psychedelics.
I think it's going to happen a little bit further than that. A little bit faster.
Until an adult can go into a shop and have it legal like cannabis.
Yeah.
So it'll take a couple of years even just for them to make up all the rules like they did with marijuana, right? There'll be endless here. But before that, there'll be hundreds of shops making it available anyways, like it was with marijuana. You will see I think legalization, it works backwards. You have to get all the shops open first, and then they legalize it after that, right? That's how things happen.
You got to push the limits.
If you wait for permission, it never happens. You got to create the reality you want and normalize it, and then the law comes in afterwards. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think is going to happen over the next 10 years. We're going to see dozens, probably not as many psychedelics places as there was cannabis, because cannabis users use a lot more cannabis than psychedelic users will take psychedelics. But I think we're going to see this becoming like a huge thing, like it was with cannabis dispensaries with hundreds.
My doctor's on board, and as soon as Jack starts doing them regular, we're doing that. So I know that Allison just got her paperwork started, or she actually got approved. I don't know, but I know that she's involved.
No judge in Canada is going to put somebody in jail for any period of time, especially if they're just selling microdoses and stuff like that. That I think is going to become, like you get CBD vape pens at gas stations and stuff.
If you're walking around with a briefcase, if you're walking around with a briefcase doing deals on the road, you deserve to get busted. But
I don't know if anybody really should be getting busted, maybe, but or if
they
are, it should be for quality control issues.
Yes.
Right? And actually, quality control can segue into my Get Your Drugs Tested program.
Okay.
You brought that up earlier, and I'd like to talk about that a bit. That's something we've been doing for a couple of years now. We just hit a milestone with our 20,000th street drug analyzed, and we have the center called Get Your Drugs Tested. Had this idea a couple of years ago. We saved up our money. We bought what's called an FTIR spectrometer. FTIR stands for Fourier Transform Infrared. And what that basically means is it's about the size of a bread box. You put the tiniest little sprinkling sample of any kind of drug, not like a herb like cannabis, but we could test pure THC or extracts, but it's more for like anything from MDMA, LSD, heroin,
Chemicals.
cocaine,
Yeah.
vitamins, ketamine, whatever, right? And then it shines this infrared laser on it, and then the spectrum that comes out, it matches that light spectrum against a huge database of thousands of substances, and we can give you a pretty good breakdown of what's in there. And we also use fentanyl test strips and benzo test strips just to make doubly sure, because those are very important things that can sometimes be there in very low quantities but still have an impact. And we are now the world's busiest drug testing center, and we fund it all with the funds from our unlicensed cannabis dispensaries.
Oh, cool.
So we the province, and there is some, the provinces do some of this in Ontario and Toronto. You can drop a sample off and get a result back 2 days later.
They're doing it. Tim Barnhart is doing it as well out on Tanganyika.
That's a great start, but 2 or 3 days is a long time to wait to get your result back for a lot of people. And in BC, they do have drug testing available, and they actually have like I think 12 or 15 of these machines. We have 2 at our center. They cost about $50,000 to buy one of these things, right? So they're not cheap. But once you've got it, it doesn't really cost a lot to operate it. Doesn't require any like super technician or anything. You can learn how to do it in a couple of weeks. Anybody can do it, right? But the province of British Columbia has like 6 or 7 times as many machines as we have. But we're doing 3/4 of all the tests in the province, because they buy these machines and then they don't use them. They say, oh, we're available at the injection site 3 days, for like 3 hours a day, a couple of days a week. And that's good for injection drug users. But a lot of people come in with drugs that are not injectable. And going into an injection site is a huge barrier for someone who wants to get their MDMA tested or whatever, right? You got to make these things available both for IV users, but also in a broader sense, right? And we're kind of on the edge of the downtown east side, so we're able to serve a lot of different people at our place. But we test all kinds of stuff, and we've definitely stopped a lot of overdoses, but we've also just stopped people from getting ripped off or having bad drug experiences. They buy what they're told is ecstasy or MDMA, and it turns out it's not fentanyl, but it's like something else, or it's Viagra and speed, or it's MDA instead of MDMA, which is kind of similar, but there's a little bit different. Or maybe it's, we bring cocaine, and maybe you find out if it's really pure or not, what it's cut with, can it be harmful? So it's something I'm really proud of. And we're at getyourdrugstested.com, and we put all of our test results online in a searchable database, and we're right now upgrading our search engine in a bit. But that means that you can look for trends in different substances and see what percentage of samples had what in it. And although we do about 85% of our samples come from Vancouver, the other 15% are mailed in from across Canada. We're the only mail-in drug service in the country. And so you can type in your city. If you're in Calgary and you got a pill, it's not 100% guaranteed that just because it's got that design on it, it's going to be the same one as what we tested, but it can help give you information about what's going on. You can look at your pill and see if we tested that same one and somebody else had to sample in or something. It's an amazing resource. We have photographs and everything. You can even just look through and see all the different kind of blotter acid we get, and the cool different, there's the Rick and Morty acid, and there's the Buddha acid, and there's the psychedelic. That's just fun to go through and just search for LSD and just look at all the different art. It's like really artistical stuff. It's interesting, and it's a unique resource, and I'm really glad we're able to provide it. Although, of course, I wish we lived in a world where our service was not needed, because drug users would get their stuff where it's been tested before they buy it, and it's got a label on it that actually represents what is inside, right? But we're still a long way from that happening. So that's why I got your drug tested program.
I don't know if you've met Len. Len is a pharmacist, and I'm curious about what you think about this stuff, Len.
About what stuff specifically?
His testing and stuff like that. He's not a pharmacy. You can just go in and what does something like that cost?
Well, honestly, no pharmacy would have the testing he has. I think he's doing a great service. My only issue is if Canada would just really legalize access of drugs, at least people could buy it. Like you can eliminate that aspect, right? But someday.
Yeah. Maybe
to what Portugal did. I mean, Portugal basically made it not
Portugal,
not
but
illegal.
isn't there also one of the U.S. states doing that too?
Colorado's on the way.
Oregon has decriminalized.
Oregon, yeah.
Mexico's also, it depends on the place, right? And like in Mexico, possession of very small quantities of different substances is allowed. Portugal has a decriminalization of possession, but they will stop people. Sometimes they'll seize their drugs. Sometimes they'll put them into they have forced rehab and some stuff like that in Portugal. So it's better, but I still think there's room for improvement. But yeah,
right. Portugal is decriminalized for possession, but it's illegal to traffic.
Yeah, there's nowhere in the world where you can just buy a lot of these things.
You
right?
should be. Listen, if somebody wants cocaine or heroin or MDMA, it should be just regulated, accessible. At least the persons are going to get cleaned. And again, it's not. I'm not trying to tell everyone to go use these products, but obviously people are using them now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's the idea of safe injection sites.
It is, but it's not necessary. But again, it doesn't mean they're always getting the safe product. Those sites are there because even that concept of that site is, well, just in case you're getting the wrong fucking thing or taking too much.
I mean, imagine like with alcohol prohibition, if they had, instead of legalizing it, they had like safe drinking sites. So you could buy your bathtub gin on the street from somebody and then take it to a place where there's only like one or two of them in the city. So there's obviously going to be imagine there's only one place to drink alcohol in the city, how crazy that place would be, right? And then you would drink it in there, and then if they thought you were about to go blind or die from drinking that, they would rush in and give you the antidote. That's kind of how, like, it's better than not having it, but really,
I think
injection sites are kind of a weird thing, right?
I think they still have it, but I think the biggest dumb thing is, like, how long has the war on drugs been going on, and how successful are people really fucking doing? So let's just bite the bullet. It's out there. Let's at least make sure people are getting what they think they're getting. You can also reduce a little bit of the organized crime aspect to it. I just think globally, from a health perspective, and honestly, it doesn't have to be a pharmacy or whatever, but just at least people are going to get what they're getting. You can have resources. Do you have a problem? Counselors, things like that, and just move on. Keep people out of jail. Keep people from dying.
Like you do at a pharmacy now, right?
Well, honestly,
you go in, you ask questions.
You're coming from a pharmacy.
Here's something that people will say, well, you want to legalize fentanyl, or you want to legalize these really strong things, but that's sort of like saying, like, well, if we're going to legalize marijuana, well, do you want to legalize like the dangerous, overly potent fake pot products and like spice and stuff that actually can cause harm? But the reality is that when you legalize, people use the harder versions way less often, and they trend towards the milder versions, right? So if we legalized cocaine in all of its forms, most people would be drinking coca tea, chewing coca gum, chewing and eating coca products in different ways, or using things. I don't think people would start injecting cocaine and snorting cocaine as much as they do now. I think it would reduce. And we have an example of that because we have caffeine, and you can buy caffeine powder and you can snort it if you want to. And some people do that. You go on Reddit and search the internet. There's communities, people that like to snort caffeine powder, but they're the vast minority. The 99% of caffeine users, even heavy caffeine users, prefer to drink it. Maybe you'll take caffeine pills if you really want it to be strong. And I think if we had banned caffeine and legalized cocaine stuff, then we'd be drinking coca tea and drinking coca drinks, and a few people might be snorting it, but it would be a minority. But for caffeine, if caffeine was prohibited, there wouldn't be any coffee, there wouldn't be any of that. Caffeine users would be using just straight caffeine and weird synthetic caffeines, and we'll be getting cut with stuff. And if we allowed opium tea and opium chewing, and not opium chewing, but opium smoking and opium products that were lower potency, a lot of heroin users would have stayed with those things and wouldn't move on to heroin. And so I think that, we saw that during alcohol prohibition, right? Every prohibition makes the drug stronger and more dangerous. And when you legalize and regulate, users just naturally prefer milder, safer forms of these substances. And really a lot of this stuff is created by prohibition. There'd be no fentanyl crisis, and overdoses of opioids would be very close to zero if we didn't have prohibition. But there'd be opium parlors around, and there'd be places like that. And I think I think the other stronger versions should be allowed in maybe a more controlled kind of way. But I think too much of the discussion gets focused on like the really strong versions, and we kind of forget that people really would prefer milder forms if those were around.
Totally.
That's kind of what we do here with coca tea and these kind of things, right? Try to sort of make more options available.
So somebody explain to me, you've got desserts and things like that are infused as well, or is it just the leaves?
We don't sell any marijuana stuff here at the cafe. I do have a cannabis dispensary in a different part of the city in the West End. That's
so it's just the leaves you deal with there, the coca.
Yeah, here we do coca leaf products. We have coca tea. We basically get whole leaf and powdered leaf, and I get seeds in and I grow the plant. And so you can make a pretty strong cup of tea. And the leaves have quite a strong impact when you chew them. Like you get a good mouthful, you really feel it quite a bit, right? So
only thing I've seen about it is on movies and documentaries and stuff like that. So I've never tried it.
Yeah, it's the use of it goes back for a very long time. They have a lot of myths and legends and cultural significance to the chewing of coca leaf. And in South America, they don't have horses, right? There's no animal there that you can easily ride around, and they live in a very mountainous area. And so they had to do a lot of foot traveling. And so chewing coca leaf, giving you the energy to go long distances on foot, became like kind of an integral part of their culture. And the Incan Empire, that was a ruling empire that kind of established and conquered a lot of neighboring areas. And they really relied on coca and taxed people in coca, just like we know that cannabis was sometimes used as a tax payment thing, and it was such an integral crop. Coca was the same kind of thing. If they were talking about a distance between two villages or between two cities, they would describe that in how many coca chews it would take for you to get there. So one coca chew a typical person would travel this distance, and so that's how they would define it. I was so worked into, it'll take you 10 chews to get there. That's quite a long way. And there's also a lot of old thousands-year-old statues of people with big bulging cheeks chewing their leaves.
Yeah.
In some areas in South America, they use something called a poporo, which is like a gourd. It'll be really fancy. There's some made out of gold, but it can also just be a regular gourd that they've hollowed out, and a stick, and they'll put seashells in there, and they'll crush the seashells and then spit on the stick and kind of put the stick in their mouth with the coca leaf and get the seashell alkalinity in there like that. And it's kind of a sort of an integral relationship you have with this poporo. The one quote we have is touching another man's poporo is like touching another man's woman. It's a very intimate kind of thing that you're sticking in your mouth and chewing on. Some cultures, only the men chew coca, or only men who are married get to chew coca, and their mother gives them their first coca thing. And it's sort of a kind of like, now you're having sex, now you can chew coca, now you're married, you're a man. This is kind of a cultural connection. Not all of them are like that, and a lot of women chew coca too. And in Bolivia, the women are the ones at the coca market mostly selling coca. It's all these different women with big baskets of coca leaves they bring to the coca market in La Paz and sell it there. But there's a lot of different cultures and groups that use coca and have different cultural rules around it. The one group I was with of indigenous people, the one where only the men chew it, they all carry a pouch with them with a big full bag of coca leaves. And whenever they greet each other in the morning, they sort of take out some of their coca leaves and they'll trade some with the other person. And so I was at the one market, and you can see them all kind of sharing coca leaves back and forth with everybody in this kind of thing. And it's sort of a way making sure everybody's got some. We all like sharing our different kinds of weed with each other, and what flavor have you got and whatever. And the coca leaves don't have quite as much variety as cannabis flowers do.
I was just going to ask you if there were different strains.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe to a connoisseur they could tell the difference between certain areas and things, but there are a few different species of coca plants. We've got two in our cafe that look quite different from each other. The one is a lot bushier with smaller leaves. They're still pretty big, but not as big as the other one we get, which really grows more straight upright with branches coming out, and it makes really big leaves. But I've chewed leaves from both of them. They're equally potent, and you can tell it's the species, but the plants do have a lot of variation. And so there's several different species and subspecies of coca.
I want to ask I was just going to ask everybody, and you can be first if you like. Have you ever tried it? I wanted to know if anybody's tried it. I haven't.
tried coca leaves.
Yeah.
I just want to know, because I've done obviously the powdered form.
Okay.
Do you get the drip when you chew the coca leaves like you do the powder?
No, you don't get a drip out of it. You like that because that's more of a nasal insufflation thing, right? But you do, and I would say if you are like if you're looking for a similar experience to using cocaine, then chewing it comes on faster and it's a little more strong, right? It's not as strong as snorting a big rail or anything, right? But chewing the leaf, you do get a numb cheek. It goes right into your bloodstream, so you get a faster thing. When you drink it, it takes a bit longer, just like drinking coffee. It takes a little longer for your body to absorb it and process it, right? So
how would you
if I
dose?
really want to wake up,
How would you dose that? Would you just take a smaller piece
for chewing it?
Yes.
So here we sell like we can't really get the full whole leaves in, but we get like chopped leaf. So we get really finely powdered leaf. We use that for tea. Then we get leaf that's kind of chopped, so it's bigger pieces, and we pre-mix that with some baking soda. We put a little mint in there for flavor. In South America, they often use other like anise or other herbs to kind of give it a nicer flavor.
That'd be good
and
for
we
a
make little
toothache.
bags, and you just pour the whole bag in your cheek, and you kind of hold it in your cheek like that, and that's how we provide it here. If you're in South America where there's plants everywhere, you can just grab a big handful and stuff it in your cheek. Normally they'll pull out the stalks first. You don't have to, but it makes it a bit more pleasurable to get rid of the chunky pieces, and make it a little nicer. In Peru and Bolivia, they sell these. It's like a green transparent bag, and it's about 8 inches high, and they'll have these bags full of coca leaves, and that'll be kind of your daily bag, right?
Wow.
So a lot of workers will buy
Just
one.
walk
of those
around
in the morning
chewing
for
on it.
a couple of bucks, and that's kind of your daily dose. But you'll just grab a new bag from some street vendor every day, So that's like you grab a cup of coffee in the morning or your whatever, right? They'll grab their bag of coca leaves and then have their chew throughout the day, and then the next day they grab another fresh bag. So a bag like about that big for like a moderate chewer, that will be kind of, if you're going to chew it all day long. We unfortunately don't have that in such quantities, although I'm hoping with the plants that I'm growing, if I can make it cost effective, to start producing locally grown coca leaf, right? Like if I can, if I can get I'm growing plants in that right now, and we sell plants, but it's really not making a lot of money. It kind of loses money growing right now, but I'm hoping that I can get it going, get enough of a yield going, dial in how I'm growing the plants. When they harvest them in South America, they just grab the branch and just pull off all the leaves, right? I'm not brave enough to do that to my beautiful, delicate plants that are not that
One
big
at a
yet,
time, please.
But I am doing plucking and pulling, and seeing. I'm trying to see how long it takes for it to grow back. You can harvest the whole. Apparently, I haven't done this to mine yet, but you can pluck the plant pretty much dry 3 times a year. It should be able to come back again and regrow. And these are plants that have been harvested and used by humans for thousands of years.
What kind of environment?
They've definitely been bred to They like it warm. Growing them in Canada, you can put them outdoors in the summer, but they're going to have to be indoors in the winter.
Okay. So they keep
like
going.
humid,
it's not like
have to, but you can.
It's not something that dies off. You just keep
40,
going.
50 years,
Okay.
right? Yeah, it'll live longer than you. In its natural environment, they will grow 12, 15 feet tall into a huge kind of gnarly bush with lots of twisted branches, and some of them kind of grow the branches.
She sounds like it'd be a good.
So you kind of make a big thing. The biggest one I've got is about
fence.
4 feet tall and about 3 feet around. And I've been starting to take cuttings and clones. And
Cool.
my dream is to have Canada's, really probably the world's first coca growing plantation indoors to produce leaves for the Canadian market, right? But we'll just see how it goes, how much I can sell the leaves for and if I can make it work. But I would love, even if it's just for me, because I love chewing coca leaves.
Yeah.
And the fresh leaves, the coca chew we have is good, but I like the fresh leaves are obviously the best. Just give them a day. You set them out for a day or so, let them dry a little bit. And just like with cannabis, it doesn't require any extra processing. You just let it dry out a bit and you're ready to go.
Wow.
What
Maybe
about
one day.
ayahuasca, Dana?
We don't sell ayahuasca here, although I've taken it quite a few times and had some remarkable experiences on ayahuasca. There's a group called the Santo Daime Church, and they have a couple of different branches, and they have a place in Vancouver. It's kind of semi-underground, and I'm not like a member of that, but I've gone to some of their ceremonies and had some very meaningful ayahuasca experiences. I'd like to expand our entheogen lineup here, and I'm kind of working on some of those things, and so that's something I'm hoping to be able to bring in the different herbs to make that up, and that maybe next year, But have you tried ayahuasca? It can be quite remarkable.
Actually, you know what? I'm very
Not yet.
curious. I'm very curious with ayahuasca, actually. Out of all the psychedelics that's out there, because just, I don't know, they say it really puts you in touch with what life is. And I kind of would like to, I've been through a lot of traumatic experiences in my life, so I'd like to, just sit back and take it and really enjoy it. But I think you're going to experience a whole bunch of different emotions.
I think it's one of those things that you have to let it be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, set and setting is always very important, right? And I've always taken ayahuasca, like most psychedelics I take by myself or with my friends or with a loved one or whatever. I'm not like getting 100 people together to take mushrooms. But when I've taken ayahuasca, it's always been with like a lot of other people, and there's hymn singing, and there's a certain amount of ceremony around it. A lot of it's in Portuguese because this church kind of is based in Brazil, so they're saying stuff you don't really, kind of like being in a Catholic thing where they're doing stuff in Latin, right? Where you're kind of understanding what there's, so that creates a very different context. But what for me was unique about both smoking DMT and taking ayahuasca is that you definitely feel like you're communicating with some outside intelligence. And whether that is or not, or your own mind, or whatever you want to put on it, whether you call it an angel or a spirit or an elf or a reflection of whatever, right? But you definitely feel like you're communicating with something else. When I've done the ceremony in that group, we're singing, talking about Jesus and things. So I sort of feel like the Christ energy, kind of not like Jesus, but like sort of that, very pure, positive kind of divine force. And, I've had different things, but I've had it, where it's sort of, in a very loving way, it kind of pushes you to like be your best self, and I've had things where it's sort of like, there's been times in my life where I'm afraid of getting busted, or I'm worried something's going to happen to me or whatever. And it's like, hey, don't be afraid. You're on a mission. You've got this thing to do, and you're doing good, but you could be doing more. And I kind of get those kind of experiences on it. Right. When I smoked DMT, it was kind of different, and in a different context. That's just more in my bedroom or something. Right. But with that, I also felt I was sort of meeting other beings, but I more kind of felt like they were giving me a little glimpse into like what the theme of the next year or two was going to be. You're kind of seeing into the future a little bit like that, and kind of getting an impression of what's going to be coming. But, I think ayahuasca can definitely be healing for a lot of people, but I think sometimes people think they're going to have this one experience and then their life's going to change and everything's going to be different. And there's still a lot of work and a lot of things to do, right? And that's why I was talking earlier about kind of microdosing can sometimes help you to kind of build on that stuff and to work your way through it. I find that mushrooms is more about kind of my internal stuff and being at peace with myself and feeling loving and connected and not being triggered by stuff and kind of empathizing with people. And if somebody's angry, I'm like, oh, well, they're probably just having a hard time, rather than being like, fuck that guy, I'm gonna. Yeah. And I find that like LSD and stuff tends to be more about the outside world, and that I want to like clean up my house and be a better person and do things or be creative or active in those kind of ways, and sort of like an environmental thing. And ayahuasca is kind of like about a transcendental kind of the most spiritual, I think, for me, of those experiences. Although also, you can microdose ayahuasca too, right? And you can take it in different levels and, that, but those are kind of my sort of way I look at those substances, right? And, also ibogaine is another one that I haven't tried, but can produce a very long.
Sorry, what's that called?
Experience. It's called ibogaine.
I've never heard of it.
It's the root or the bark of a plant. It's the iboga plant. It's an African plant, and it's apparently very good for heroin addiction and drug addiction issues. For heroin especially, or opiates, it will cut your withdrawal symptoms as well as like giving you a new perspective on your use. And there's ibogaine therapy places. Ibogaine is actually legal in Canada. It's not really supposed to be sold for human use, but it's not like a controlled drug either. And ibogaine, but like, yeah, a lot of these things,
I've tried kratom.
Yeah, kratom.
Kratom, sorry, yeah.
Is that what you said? Kratom,
yep.
Yeah. Oh, people call it kratom. I don't know.
Yeah.
We sell that here as well, actually, and I was going to mention that because that's not really like an enlightening type of thing or a psychedelic, but
no,
but
I fell and I had to stay in Hamilton because we had our Hope thing going on. And so I stayed, and Paula gave me some to help with the pain, and it just instant almost. I had broken ribs and a broken elbow and everything. I didn't know that at that point, but I would not have been able to stay if I hadn't tried it. And I was wanting to try it anyways. It was a reason, right?
It's really beneficial. It's a really good.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some risk involved with kratom, but it's a really good substitute for opiates. It's got very opiate-like properties, but it's a much easier to titrate your dose. It's if you overdose on kratom, it's like an alcohol overdose. You feel nauseous and you throw up, but you're not going to go into respiratory distress and die like a heroin overdose.
You do have to take a lot though, in order for it to work.
Take a larger amount. We sell some sort of extracted thing so that they're stronger, so you don't have to take quite as much of an amount to get the effect and everything.
And it's powder.
It's
horrible.
But that's also, if you take large amounts of it every day, you're going to get withdrawal symptoms, and you're going to have potentially create a tendency of that. Yeah, we warn and we tell people if you don't need to take it every day, don't take it every day. But if you're taking heroin every day and now you're taking kratom every day instead, or
which is the lesser of the evil,
then that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And kratom, it's easier to work with. It's easier to sort of measure out your dose. You can take it in capsules. It's just a green powder.
Yeah.
It's the leaf of a tree that grows in Southeast Asia.
Yep.
You just powder it up. And
it's also illegal in Canada.
It's not as illegal though. It's
almost.
It's not a controlled drug, so it's not in the CDSA. You're allowed to possess and sell kratom, but not for human consumption. So when you get this weird loop, it's like selling a bong for tobacco use only in the olden days, right? You can sell kratom, but you got to be like, here's your aromatherapy, wink, wink.
Yeah.
But
like seeds for entertainment purposes.
Yeah, exactly. So people, all the websites that sell kratom all have on them for research purposes only.
Yeah.
Don't actually take this. Whatever you do, don't take this much and put it with this and eat it that way. But that's bad because it can be there are risks involved and awareness involved. So we don't pretend that we're selling it for something else, right? During alcohol prohibition, they would sell you a homebrew alcohol kit with the instructions would be don't do this, and then it'll explain to you how to make alcohol at home, right? So similar kind of a thing, but we don't follow those kind of things. We tell people what it is and how to use it safely and give them guidance on it so they are aware of what they're taking. But there's for some reason there's nowhere else in the city to get it, as far as I know, other than mail order. And when we kind of started this, we were taken over from another business in the city that shut down, and we had some clients who really expressed their gratitude that we were making this available.
I hear
and some people would
that
be going back. They'd be going back to street drugs if they couldn't get kratom from it.
There's a documentary on Netflix about it. I can't remember the name of it, but one of the things that jumped out at me about the whole thing was it doesn't just mask everything. It short circuits that pain receptacle, right? Just cuts it off, so it's gone. And there are some athletes out there that use it very privately that are having great success with it. Professional athletes.
Yeah, no, it's going to become a big thing as well. And so Thailand has just legalized kratom there, and it's becoming a legal industry. America, it's also in this kind of gray area. The DEA is trying to push a ban on kratom in the U.S., but I think they're trying to get the rest of the world in on it and try to get it into the UN treaties or something. But that is all prohibition is terrible, but this, especially in an opioid crisis, they should be subsidizing and offering kratom and making it available. And it's so cheap to access, and it can save people's lives.
It's not for everybody.
Their lives in so many ways. No, I don't think you should be making. But instead, if you're already using opiates, someone should be saying, "Hey, this," and it's not good for everybody either. Not every opiate user is going to want to switch to kratom, but however many, there's definitely a market for it, and it should be more widely available. And it's interesting, kind of like cannabis. It comes in like different flavors. So we have sativa and indica and hybrid, and with kratom, it's color. So you have green, red, and white kratom. And the red kratom is kind of like the indica, so it's more pain relieving and relaxing. And the white is the more kind of like the sativa. So people take white kratoms before they exercise or kind of in the morning. I know I don't recommend this necessarily, but some people post and they mix our coca tea with white kratom together a little bit and get a boost. Then the green kratom is kind of halfway between the two. And so for kratom varieties, you'll get the color and then the region. So you get red Bali, green Bali, red tie and green and white tie and different. So you get a color and a place name is how you describe kratom strains. And we have like 15 different strains, different colors. Some sell better than others, but different people seek out different varieties.
Just like bud, right?
For different reasons, right?
Some bud's
Very
better
similar
than
to
the
cannabis
other.
like that, where you get the different, and you can kind of see it. It's the veins of the leaves, and the red vein kratom or the white vein. It's a slightly different shading to how the leaves look, and that's what defines the different strains. So that's just a little kratom lesson, and it's I think something like a lot of these plant medicines, they should be more widely available. And although whole plants can have risks too, especially these ones that have been used for like thousands of years, like they're safe and they should be. They're always the safest options, right? And they should be the first one people have, rather than kind of the most difficult one to access. Like getting opium should be way easier than getting fentanyl, but it's the exact opposite. And getting in every case, right? The milder form should be more available. It should be way easier to get coca tea and coca leaf than it is to get cocaine, but it's not. It's the exact opposite. It's impossible to get coca leaf, and it's super easy to get cocaine. And not that I'm against cocaine, but like, the safer, milder form should always be way more readily available. And prohibition just has created an upside down world.
Sorry, I was just reading something. Yeah, no, I mean there's a reason why this stuff is there. I mean, they've been using this. Societies have been using this stuff for centuries already. It's just our thinking, I think, is different, and we're watching what's going on with the opiate epidemic and with crack and stuff like that. But there are safer alternatives, and that's what it comes right down to it. If you're addicted to cocaine, don't start chewing coca leaves.
Oh, I would disagree with that. I
Really?
think you're addicted to cocaine. There's not a lot of studies, but there's a couple of studies showing that if you've quit cocaine entirely and you don't want it in your life, then maybe it's possible. But if you are a cocaine user looking to reduce or modulate
as an alternative, I'm sure. Yeah.
I've had people come in before saying, like, especially when I used to sell coca leaf before, that and there's some studies showing that if you can chew coca leaf, you don't have to start so much cocaine. Or maybe
Fair enough.
You can just
Fair enough.
And you just drink really strong coca tea and chew your leaves, and that's a much safer, better, and hopefully more affordable way of taking it.
It would be the same as using cannabis instead of opiates, right? They would.
Exactly.
It would be the same.
Or if you ingest cannabis, you don't smoke as much.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
For some people.
Well, no, people that are using it medicinally, if they're treating something.
I think the more as a user,
it depends on what you treat, though, Marcel. Because I treat my anxiety and I need immediate release, so I'm smoking all the time. Even edibles don't last for forever.
No, Shatterizers.
I would chew the coca leaf over the cocaine, because this is why I stopped taking chemicals in the first place.
Yes.
It's because that purple pill, the purple butterfly ecstasy that I bought this week, was not the same as the purple butterfly I bought last week from the same guy, because it's just food coloring and a stamp, right? It's whatever they put in it. So I'm happy, Dana, you have this place where people can go and get their shit tested, so that way they know what they're taking.
It creates accountability among dealers and users, right? Because not everybody can go back to their dealer and complain, but a lot of times you can, especially like MDMA type dealers and psychedelic dealers and stuff. They're often like part of the community, or they're a friend, and they usually they want to provide good drugs. They're not. Sometimes people are looking to rip people off, absolutely. But a lot of drug dealers, I would say the majority, especially for psychedelics and stuff, they want to provide a good product. They're usually people that are into it themselves,
and they have good knowledge,
and they want to share the love, right? And so we get people coming in sometimes. We don't ask people, but there's definitely people who are dealers who come in. They'll have 20 different samples of MDMA they want us to test or whatever, right? Of different kinds, and they're trying to figure out. And if you can go back to your dealer and go, look, you told me that was MDMA. It was actually only half, and it was cut with something else, or you told me it was MDMA, but it was actually MDA, and that's just a little bit different and not what I was looking for, or whatever. And they might not know either. So having that accountability, I think, really helps. And sometimes it's about saving someone from a deadly overdose. Sometimes it's just about saving them from getting ripped off. Or they bought MDMA once and it was only half potency, and now they buy some and it's really good and it's really pure. But they said, well, last time it took 2 pills for me to get what I needed. So now they take 2 pills of this one and now they're way higher than they wanted to be, right? So it's all that stuff. And sometimes just
it is
not
about
being sure what you
accountability.
took can ruin your trip. You're like, did I really get what I thought it was? Maybe I got something else. And now you're freaking out and worried. And if you had a test before, you can, okay, I know it should be what it says it was, and you can, so all these kind of aspects are important. Like, stopping overdoses is important, but to me it's all part of it. And we do test a lot of MDMA.
That's why I was promoting regulated accessibility. Know what you're getting. Because no offense, fentanyl's used in a hospital all the time. They just know what it is. They know how to dose it and use it correctly.
Yeah, no, fentanyl, I mean, I don't think there'd be fentanyl on the street if we had a legal access system, but everything, it's all about dose and potency.
Fentanyl's a good drug.
Aspects. Oh, absolutely.
Fentanyl for a palliative care patient is a phenomenal drug.
Yeah, but you got to dose it right? And that's
100%. That's the problem when you have people trying to add drops into this and that and white powder and shit. You kill people. But it's all about knowing right. And again, cannabis is a very, very safe product. Even psilocybin, very, very safe product. And you can also see it's weed is weed is weed. But the difference between 18 or 30%, it's not going to hurt you. But when you're talking about white powders and MDMA and pure chemicals,
you can turn cannabis into white powders too, right? And a lot of synthetic cannabinoids can really fuck you up. We see a lot of synthetic cannabinoids. I would almost compare, like, fentanyl isn't like, it's not made from opium poppies. It's like a synthetic kind of thing. And there's synthetic cannabinoids that are similar to cannabis, like regular marijuana, but they're way stronger, or they cause weird side effects. They hit you way harder. They can cause withdrawal symptoms. And, no one would really be seeking those things out if regular cannabinoids are more readily available too, right? But we do see we see a lot of great drugs, but we see a lot of weird stuff too. And sometimes we see, I have to look it up. I see it on the thing. What is that? I look it up. Oh, that's like some synthetic cannabinoid that someone's marketing as MDMA or as anything. We see sometimes, really bizarre mixes. And sometimes just the guy didn't clean off his scale properly. He was laying one drug, and then they put some other different powder on it. And, sometimes it doesn't matter, but a little bit of fentanyl or a little bit of benzo can go a long way. Not even the fentanyl is clean. People think they've bought fentanyl and they come to us and it's actually a benzodiazepine. And so they're not even getting like good fentanyl, right? Like you think, oh, fentanyl's the worst thing. And that's not even the worst thing. Like these benzos are sold as opiates and they're extremely different. And if you have an overdose from benzodiazepine, it's like Xanax, right? But these are like 2 Xanax, like what fentanyl is to heroin, these things are to Xanax, right? And they can, if you're having a benzo overdose, Narcan doesn't work, naloxone doesn't work on you. It's a whole different process. And there's a whole other thing happening now that's just starting to become more and more common. But we're seeing a lot more of these benzos and synthetic things like that showing up. The drug supply is just getting worse, and fentanyl's not even like the worst part of it now.
That's just unreal, really. I mean,
I never understood, Dana, drug dealers that want to kill off their customers.
It doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't think the dealer at the street level is trying to do that. I think it's just that they don't get a lot of choice in where they're buying from, right? Now, think of it, if you're a cartel, like let's say you're a cartel guy and you got the choice, okay, I can hire all these farmers and grow all this fucking shitload of opium. It's very hard to hide. The cops are going to come in and spray my plants. I got to pay a lot of labor, a lot of work. This stuff's bulky and harder. Or I can get one lab. I can make a shitload of fentanyl out of it. It's way cheaper for me to sell. I can smuggle it way more easily. So the guy on the other end and who's selling drugs in downtown Vancouver or whatever, people may come to him, hey, you got any heroin? I wish I did, but this is all I can get is this stuff. Okay, well, I'll take that because I need something and this is all that's available. That's more how it is, right? And so I don't think it's like, and in terms of the overdose death crisis, like that's not really hurting. There's so many people using out there that it's a long time before we're going to run out of drug users, and new ones are cropping up all the time. But I think that's what it is, right? Because you think, oh, it's a terrible business strategy. You're killing off all your best customers. But I think at the higher up level where the products really get decided, they don't care. The number of people dying compared to the total sales they're making is not a very big number overall, right? So I think that's what happens. I met guys in Mexico who were like, their community had been growing opium poppies for quite a while, and like as years, and it was funding their whole community. And now they're sitting on all this opium that the cartels don't want anymore because they replaced them all with a couple of labs. And the labs are way harder for the cops to find, way easier to like rebuild. It's not based on the season, so you've got a steady supply throughout the year rather than having to, like, it's just way more easily for the dealers or for the initial high-end people, right? And if they shut down the labs, I mean, we could have fentanyl labs in Canada and in the States, really, if we wanted to. Ultimately, that's what's going to happen if they shut it down more. It'll just become domestic supply, right? So, but that's the reason, I think, is how it goes like that. I think a lot of street dealers here would prefer to have heroin available, but they just can't get it anymore. It's just not around, or it's really hard to access, you know?
Humans are greedy. People always steal, and I know people, and there's cases in the States where fuckers are cutting down chemotherapy drugs. So people are assholes. Just be aware.
Wow.
Yeah, and well, and Prohibition puts like the worst people in charge of everything, right? I mean, the most
people
vicious,
agree.
ruthless
Human nature.
people are going to run that business because you can't go to court to resolve your disputes, and so it's always with violence. And like in Mexico, you know, they brought in the army about a decade ago to start fighting their drug war, and as a result, there's like hundreds of thousands of dead people. There's villages, or not villages, but like cities where like the whole police force quits because the cartel says we're going to murder every cop, and they put up a list of all the cops and their home addresses on telephone poles around town. I read the paper. One guy, they just delivered him like a severed head. It's like crazy stuff that we don't even really hear about so much here. But that's like the reality of you know, bringing in the army to make the war on drugs a real war, and it's just escalated to a huge degree. And it's not, and drugs are more plentiful than ever, right? You know, and more profitable. And now the worst, most psychopathic, violent, evil people are the ones in charge.
That actually just happened this week in Cancun with an attack at a resort in Cancun. A bunch of shooting. Everybody's locked down and hiding. And what it was the local gang was upset that some new drug dealers had moved into the resort. So they went and shot up the resort.
Yeah, it's a billions of dollar industry, and I've seen videos of like cartels like showing off all their weaponry and their tanks and their rocket launchers and stuff, and putting videos on Twitter and on YouTube and stuff of they're becoming their own military, right? And we think of the drug war as like a metaphor, you know, but it's really a real war. Like the Navy is involved, troops are involved. There's real wars in Afghanistan and in Colombia, and that it's a real war with soldiers on both sides, and you know, and it creates a situation where everybody's kind of got an entrenched value in keeping it going. The cops and that military, I mean, the cops like it because it gives endless jobs, endless benefits, makes them stronger and more powerful than ever. Drug dealers love prohibition because it makes them tons of money. It keeps the competition out. It provides them profits. The only ones that get hurt by the war on drugs are the users in the regular society, but everyone fighting it actually benefits from it in the sense that it provides huge profits and financial benefits on both sides to keep this thing going. So, but we're going to end it in our lifetimes.
You think
it's
so?
Crumbling now, but yeah, I do. I think it's going to, I mean, I don't think we're going to see full, I'm not sure we'll see full legalization in the way I want to see it in my lifetime, which is, you know, quite a few decades away. I hope.
Are they going to control it like pot? Do you think?
Well, I mean, look at the rules I read around pot, and I'm thinking what kind of rules are going to run around legal opiates, right? I mean, that's going to be a challenge. But I think psychedelics are going to be the next step, and I think that like the safe supply call is really getting out there. I'm actually, I mean, in Vancouver here, people are talking a lot about a heroin buyers club or compassion club in some way, following that same rule where you know, it's just the access that's the hard part, right? And getting a good, safe supply to make available to people. Opening a cannabis dispensary, there's always tons of weed around to make available. But they've been doing, it really reminds me of the early days of our cannabis movement when we give away joints and have raffles and 420 giveaways and stuff to kind of normalize cannabis by giving it away. They've been doing giveaways of cocaine and heroin and meth and stuff in Vancouver at these protests. And that sounds insane at first, right? But they're not like throwing, in syringes out to the crowd or whatever,
Yeah,
like we used to use joints, right?
Yeah.
And they try to get the people to register. They're currently already drug users, but they're making more a point that you're not providing us a safe supply, so we're going to do it. And they have it in measured dosages. They test it all at our lab. They've got a little box with like all the information on it.
Yeah.
And they're sort of trying to say people should be able to buy drugs like this in a proper container and a proper thing. And they go in front of the police station. We had one of the city councilors in Vancouver led one of these giveaways. And so like Councillor Gene Swanson, who's a great city councilor, was like participating in the civil disobedience action. And so I think that that's going to start happening. We're going to see, hopefully I can help make it happen. In the next year or two, I think we're going to see Canada's first heroin compassion club, buyers club of some kind above ground opening in Vancouver. And I think we'll probably see them, once we get that going. I wouldn't be surprised if we could see that happening in Toronto as well. But that's going to be challenging. Not so much because we're going to get busted, but just like the logistics of getting a safe supply and making it available. And that it seems a lot more challenging. Like mushrooms, like people come in here every day trying to wholesale me mushrooms to sell, right? There's plenty around, but I don't see a lot of heroin dealers, right? So that's a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I don't know that lifestyle. I don't get that lifestyle, but okay, it's not my lifestyle, right? So
yeah, you might be surprised at what kind of people use these things.
I know.
Too, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a opiate user. I've tried things a few times that never really had any appeal for me, right? Cannabis, the first time I tried it,
we've had Dr. Peter Ferenczi on the show, who is known as what was it, Marcel? The crackhead, Dr. Crackhead. Okay, and he's on staff at CAMH. He's a scientist, like a research scientist, right? And he's very open about his past. He doesn't say if he's still using it or not, but he's been very open about his experiences in the past. And okay, I mean, if you're gonna tell people not to do something, there should be something behind it telling those people. Would it not make sense to have people trying it to see? I don't know. Maybe I'm being foolish about that.
There's a difference between like discouraging things in society and prohibiting them as well, right? And like using criminal prohibition to do stuff. And really, a lot of the best policy is more about nudging people in the right direction rather than really being heavy-handed. And there's a lot of research showing that the nudging in the right way, without making things mandatory, but just sort of encouraging people, and said availability is one of that. I'm for legalization of all substances, but I think it should probably be easier to get a cup of opium tea than it should be to buy a fentanyl or heroin, right? Like, shouldn't be illegal, but it should be it should be more available. Just like it's easier to get a cup of coffee than it is to get, caffeine powder and stuff, right? Like, so those, those
some people say coffee is just as bad.
Accessible.
Coffee
coffee can be quite habit forming. And what would happen if we banned coffee, right? Like, a lot of people would quit drinking coffee, but some portion of coffee drinkers would not want to quit. And coffee is so ubiquitous. Even if it's one coffee drinker in 100, like, kept using caffeine after prohibition, that would be a huge portion of our society. And we would see caffeine, like coffee, become less pure and more weird things. We'd see pure caffeine coming out there. We'd see the demonization of caffeine users. People would look at, how they used to have caffeine in drinks and they give it to kids and there was no age limits, and wow, they were crazy back then, right? And now, and we'd see people snorting caffeine. We'd see synthetic caffeine on the market. We'd see injectable. It wouldn't happen right away. It would take like, many years, maybe generations to kind of get to that point. The same way we went from opium tea being very common in the 1900s to like fentanyl being injected now over a century later. It's a path, and that same path could easily happen. And coffee really came close to being banned a couple of times in history, has been banned at certain times in history. And, it's very plausible to think of a parallel world where coca drinks never got prohibited and coffee did, and just what that would look like. And you kind of realize how arbitrary it is as to what plants get banned and what don't, and how
Well,
it has very little to do with their intrinsic substance nature and a lot to do with racism and cultural effects.
Well, it's like hemp.
And
Look,
these kind of things are way more important.
At one time, every farm in America had to dedicate a portion of their land to hemp production during the war, because that's how they made the uniforms and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, it was World War II. The Nazis actually grew hemp too,
Did they?
sort of thing about the Nazi hemp primer. It was an issue on both sides. Like, hemp had just been prohibited in the late 30s. They'd banned hemp in America, and a lot of other countries had followed suit. And then when World War II started and the American supply of fiber got cut off because of Japan and the Philippines and stuff, and suddenly they started. Canada also actually re-legalized hemp as well. Same thing happened here. We didn't put out like the hemp movie Hemp for Victory that came out in the U.S. propaganda film for farmers to grow more hemp, right? Canada didn't have that, but we also re-legalized hemp in Canada during World War II for a couple of years. And the Nazi Germany put out this thing called the Humorous Hemp Primer, and it was like a rhyming, funny guide, not something you'd expect to come out of Nazi Germany, encouraging farmers to grow more hemp. With all these funny cartoons and illustrations and stuff, and showing them how to grow it and why the government guaranteed a good price. And so, yeah, hemp, came back during World War II, and then as soon as the war was ended, hemp prohibition came back again, and that lasted until, fairly recently, when hemp is now starting to break through.
And they don't teach that. I mean, I learned that in grade school because my father, who is a physician, helped me do my first big project for school, and it happened to be about cannabis. And that was in the 70s, and then I didn't really even think about it until I was in my teens again,
Not only do they not teach it, they actively suppress a lot of this information, right? The American government made a film, Hemp for Victory. It's like a 15-minute film about the benefits of hemp. And then after that film, it's now documented again, but only because a guy named Jack Herrera, who was a very prominent cannabis activist and really in some ways kind of launched the modern hemp movement with his book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. But he went to Congress, the Library of Congress in the U.S. They didn't have that film. He couldn't find it. He got a copy and made them put it in the Library of Congress and get it back there again and become a documented thing. But they were like, "What? We don't know what you're talking about. Pro hemp film from the U.S. government?
No.
Such a thing does not exist, right?" And
he found it.
And so, yeah, a lot of this sort of lost history and that is being recovered now. There's a lot of great Canadian history too. People don't know about the history of cannabis in Canada. That Canadians don't know, how integral hemp cultivation was in early Canada. It was interesting, the dynamic here, because the English, the British, were looking around the world for places to grow more hemp, right? Because the British ruled the world through their navy, and their navy was dependent on hemp for the ropes and sails that they got from Russia. And Russia had a lot of peasants and a lot of hemp and cheap products, right? And so the British Navy did not want to be only dependent on Russia because they wanted their own source. And so they looked to Australia. We know they sent prisoners to Australia. What we don't know is they were sending them there hoping they would be a cheap labor source for the hemp fields. And it's well documented. They were looking, it didn't really pan out properly, but they were looking to grow hemp in Australia, and they were sending prisoners there because they wanted cheap labor, slave labor, to work the hemp fields. And in Canada, they were also looking to grow hemp here. And they had all these French farmers, and then the Canadian English government was trying to get these French farmers to grow more hemp and trying to push them into it. But the French did not want to grow hemp because it was a cash crop, so they couldn't eat it, and they were going to sell it and get money. But when you're in a little colony, money doesn't really go so far. You need food and stuff that you can live off of, and hemp fiber didn't really provide that. And also there was a weird thing about the Catholic Church. The priests would tell them not to grow hemp. And it wasn't because priests didn't like marijuana. It was because the priests would get a tithe. If you grew a food crop, if you're a Catholic, French Catholic, growing food in Quebec, you would give 10% of the crop or the revenue to the church. But they didn't apply to other crops. And so hemp was not a food crop. So if a farmer stopped growing food and started growing hemp, that cost the church their tithe. They didn't get their money. And so there was also a financial investment that the priests would tell the French farmers, do not grow hemp for the British. And also the French didn't like the British ruling them anyways, so why would they want to help make their navy better by growing hemp for them? So for quite a while there was this conflict, and I've got a lot of different governors' records of them trying to push the French into growing more hemp and trying to get people to grow more hemp. And they did it, but it wasn't. They could not get, like, the British couldn't really get another source of hemp fiber going, and they persisted for quite a few decades. And then eventually, steam engines were invented at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. Hemp suddenly became a lot less important because steam engines were available. Cotton was more cheap to produce, and so hemp fell out of favor. You didn't need. They still use it for some things, ropes and that, but the sales weren't an issue anymore.
And look what's happening now with
cotton became so much cheaper to produce, and so hemp kind of fell out of favor. And then
now
it was
hemp
going to come back in the 30s, and then it all went to shit, right? So
and now
that's some interesting Canadian hemp history that a lot of Canadians don't know.
They've got the concrete, the hemp creek that they're making. They're making planes out of hemp. Although they've been making running boards and stuff for some of the major car manufacturers for a long time. Right?
One of the good things about using hemp as a biomass for building material is that you're locking in carbon, right? So if we're concerned about global warming or climate change or whatever, and if you want to get CO2 out of the atmosphere, growing hemp and then locking that in by using it as a construction material is like a way of reducing CO2 in the atmosphere. They're looking at scrubbers and stuff, but nature is like, growing plants like that can be really, really beneficial.
They've already proven
fiber,
that
concrete has other benefits too as well.
There's something like hemp. There's hemp fields near Russia, near where the nuclear disaster happened, and it's kind of helping with
Chernobyl.
Yeah, they've got weed growing there. Yeah.
And mushrooms works for that too. Actually,
really,
cannabis is good for taking heavy metals out of the soil. It will absorb things, and then you can even use that fiber sometimes, but for certain industrial purposes, right? But also there's a lot of stuff about different kinds of mushrooms, not so much like psychedelic mushrooms, but mushrooms in general, and certain strains of mushrooms can be used to absorb and break down heavy metals and toxic materials and reclaim land and that kind of stuff. There's actually, you mentioned Netflix documentary, and there's one on there called Fantastic Fungi.
Yeah, that's
it's great, and it's got these great, you've all seen it, the great time-lapse shots of mushrooms growing and blooming, and you can almost see them growing with your naked eye right as they finish their cycle. They grow. They take forever to get all cultivated, and the last little part where they make their blossom or make the mushroom cap, it's like happens in 24 hours, and it's really
I have
fast.
them all over my farm, and in the morning when I go out just after the dew, and they pop up all over the place, and I've been leaving them just in wherever they are. There's different kinds. I don't know anything about them that I would even want to try them or anything, but I need to get some kind of a book or guidance or something. But
be careful eating random mushrooms,
no.
Obviously, but there can be a lot of aside from the psychedelic ones, and sometimes the psychedelic psilocybin ones go well with other ones, right? There's a lot of idea about lion's mane, which has a lot of benefits to your neurons and to the mycelium sheathing of your nerves. It's kind of this fatty sheathing, and apparently this lion's mane can help repair that, which increases your reactions. It helps stop some neurological type ailments, and that psilocybin, which triggers neurological growth and neurogenesis, which some cannabinoids also do, trigger new brain cells to grow. And that other mushrooms sometimes, like especially lion's mane and psilocybin,
what's the one that's on birch?
Very popular.
Agiricon?
No.
Well, there's definitely a lot of different other ones that are out there.
You can actually infect your birch tree with it. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, chaga.
Chaga. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. That's got a lot of benefits too. Yeah, and there's a lot of these, and it's weird. As you see from the documentary, mushrooms are more closely related to humans than they are to other plants or to plants. Their fungus are more.
A lot of people see mushrooms growing in a field, and it's like a snake. Don't go near there. But they're actually quite fascinating. Some of them glow. Some of them just sit there. Some of them are ugly. Some of them are, looks like a little house. Like
they're very highly evolved and have a lot of very interesting things going on.
They actually think.
Yeah, well, it depends how you define think, but there's definitely a lot of complexity going on and a lot of interaction, and we're learning how plants and trees will talk to each other.
Yeah.
And a mother tree can communicate, and so they can share nutrients, and we think of things as discrete parts, and ourselves too. And this is something that mushrooms helps teach you. We think of ourselves as I'm an individual and I'm all me. And sometimes when you take the mushroom psychedelic experience, you kind of lose your ego when you realize we're actually all part of a greater organism. And really, even our own thought, none of us made up our own language, right? We're all taught these ideas and things from a larger group, and we're all in a way kind of neurons in a big brain of humans or whatever, right? We're all sort of interconnected in these more deep kind of ways. And I think that I've had patients tell me, like, when I microdose, I see a tree and I'm more aware of that tree as a living being and that we're sort of connected. And they're not like, it's not like taking their whole day hugging trees or whatever, but you just kind of feel more, you realize that all living things, we all share common ancestors, we're all interconnected, and we're all sort of on team life, right? As we're all sort of part of that same thing, down from the mushrooms and bugs and algae and whatever disgusting creatures are out there to humans and trees and animals and everything. It's all one. It sounds trite when you say it, but when you're in that psychedelic space, that can be a very revelatory understanding when you really feel that in your gut, as opposed to just kind of we're all whatever. You really feel that as a true thing inside yourself, and that could be a real life-changing experience.
You know what?
Especially now, where people always feel disconnected, and maybe now more than ever, right? So
I've only done mushrooms, like I started doing them at Gunjanistas in Hamilton, so I was around a lot of people, but then I just started. I typically will only do them when I'm alone. I do them before the show, but when I'm alone, I think I don't go out and stuff like that on mushrooms. I have, and I felt a little weird. It didn't.
Yeah, it depends on your dose. I certainly wouldn't like. I wouldn't
next
take
day
a psychedelic dose. The people I'm not comfortable
Eat
with.
5 grams and go grocery shopping.
No. It's the next day. It's the next day that does it for me. Like, I wake up in the morning the next day after I've microdosed, and I'm like, yeah, let's go and seize the day, kind of thing. Where I don't have that feeling usually. That's one of the reasons I like it.
You've got this art behind you with this amazing psychedelic mushrooms, and they kind of remind me some of those of the
I forgot about that.
psychedelic mushroom, the Amanita muscaria mushroom, right? The classic fairy tale mushroom with the red with the white spots on it, right? That kind of mushroom that you. And those
Alice
are
in Wonderland
mushrooms. But they're when people think magic mushroom, that's often
what they think.
They don't really always think of the amber psilocybe mushrooms that we're familiar with here, right? The archetypical magic mushroom. Really,
if you're on Facebook and you look in your little emotes, you'll see that there is a mushroom icon in there that you can post in your chats, but there's nothing representing cannabis at all.
So I just those mushrooms have some interesting stories behind them as well, right? Those ones, and they produce different feelings, more feelings of flying. You can get insights in that, but sometimes you get size distortion, so you might feel like you're smaller or bigger, something like that. So you can feel like you're flying or leaving your body and stuff. And those mushrooms are really weirdly intertwined with our Christmas traditions and with Santa Claus in ways that you don't always expect. But like those mushrooms grow in Northern Europe, where a lot of our Christmas traditions come from. They are associated with pine, or I think it's fir trees, actually. They grow under a certain kind of tree. I think it's the fir trees, the evergreen, and they have a relationship with the root. So you only find these white and red presents under the tree.
The acidity.
And they are harvested by a shaman or a person who might wear red and white in that way. They live in some areas like that in like a yurt, which is like a teepee kind of a
in what areas?
This is like like Lapland, especially like northern Finland, also northern Russia as well, but that kind of area, right? So in Lapland especially, they herd reindeer and they gather reindeer together.
Wow.
And these mushrooms grow there, and it's sort of part of their cultural experience. So the shaman the chimney hole would also be an exit and entrance hole. You get a shaman going out, gathering up the mushrooms that were under a tree, bringing them back. Maybe they dry them out in stockings or the socks that they hang, or they string them up with strings and hang up these mushrooms, and then take them in a ceremonial kind of way. So you can already see some of the Christmas kind of aspects in there. But it goes further. They saw the North Star as like a kind of an entry point to the divine realm, right? And so the North, Santa Claus lived at the North Pole on the North Star. And the North Star is the tail end. The North Star is the tail end of the Little Dipper, which goes around the North Star every 24 hours, every day. It circles as all stars do, right? Circles the sky. And the Little Dipper was kind of seen as a chariot of the gods, often like Thor or a different god depending. And so Thor is riding this chariot around the sky in one night around the North Star, just like Santa Claus travels the world in one night in his magic chariot, and they herd reindeer, and the reindeer are very attracted to salt. And one of the ways you get salt is in human urine. And so the lap herders, they gather some of their urine and they keep it in a thing. And when they want to gather the reindeer, they spray the urine around, and that attracts the reindeer to them, right? Now, if you've eaten the mushrooms, and also this happens with MDMA as well and some other things, it's not processed by your body. So the drug is present in your sweat and in your urine. And so if you were to drink the urine of someone else who has eaten mushrooms or taken MDMA, you can get high off it as well. And actually, in a way, it's actually, although it's much less pleasant to consume, it's actually safer with that because the mushrooms do have some toxic aspects to them. But when it goes through a liver, it gets cleansed out.
All the toxicity.
So now you've got these guys who are taking mushrooms, and then they're counting their urine, and they're going out and spraying it around for the deer.
Here,
the
have
deer,
some.
The reindeer come, and they ingest the urine, and then the deer will dash and prance and
Oh,
run
wow.
around and get high too, right? And they believe, and now you take a drug that makes you feel like you're flying. You've got flying reindeer with the sleigh, and all these white and red things. Saint Nicholas, when they were converted from paganism to Christianity, Saint Nicholas became a very key saint for a lot of these areas. Saint Nicholas is still the patron saint of Russia and of Finland, and Saint Nicholas kind of was used to replace a lot of their shamans. And there's paintings of Saint Nicholas with this red and white pattern on his clothes or behind him in the painting, showing that they kind of adopted St. Nicholas as kind of a super shaman, sort of Christianized kind of figure. So you take all that stuff, then you filter it, all these pagan traditions, filter that through Christianity, filter it again through Victorian England, filter it again through Coca-Cola and stuff, and that's how you kind of get the modern Santa Claus with flying reindeer, these red and white tradition, bringing a tree into your house with a star on top. That's not the Star of Bethlehem. That star on top of the tree is the North Star. And that tree sort of symbolized to them the world, the top of the tree or the pole that the world rotates around. This world tree, we're kind of on the middle earth. Up in the branches of the tree are sort of like spirits and angelic beings.
Yeah.
Then the roots underneath is kind of the underworld. The Norse believed there was a big dragon gnawing at the roots of the world tree, and one day he was going to kill it and Ragnarok would happen and stuff. But this idea of a sacred tree, it became a thing in Germany where they would bring in trees at Christmas and decorate trees. And then the Germans married into the British royal family, they brought the tree tradition over. So everyone in England started having trees in their homes because the king was doing it. And the king was doing it. He was from Germany and had this European northern tradition. And so all that stuff mixed all up together is our modern Christmas. And you can even see, like, they still sell Christmas ornaments for the tree that are those magic mushrooms with that red and white thing on it, with an elf sitting on it or something like that.
And here I thought it started with HR Puff and stuff.
No, I'll save that lecture for another time, all the weed references in there. But yeah, so Christmas, Santa Claus is really a psychedelic shaman at heart, and our Christmas traditions are based
weed
on
references in HR Puff and stuff?
No.
Yeah, well, even just the name itself, HR Puff, a hand-rolled puff and stuff, and like he looks like a big
show.
bud,
I
right?
love that show.
Some of it's a bit maybe pushing things a bit, but he looks like he's like a big weed bud. He's green and orange, kind of, and puffing stuff. Like, and the song, the theme song of it is like, you can't get enough of puffing stuff, and like it's a bit, I can't say 100% for sure but there's a lot. And the same guys who did that show did another show called Lidsville, and the lid at the time was a definite, like a reference to you would sell cannabis in a jar lid, and the lid of cannabis was a very common measurement. In Lidsville, there's people that are like talking hats that fly around for their lids, but like there's a lot of kind of weird drug references in those things. And so HR Puff and stuff, I'm pretty convinced I'd have to brush up on my research now, but I wrote an article once about all the weed and HR Puff and stuff, and some of the episodes have kind of
even the hilarious House of Frankenstein or Frankenstein or whatever it was called with Bill.
A lot of this stuff's like for adults and for kids, and they put in fun jokes and
cartoons. Look at the cartoons that we used to watch as kids are now banned. So it's like,
but you have to remember, you've got adults writing these cartoons for kids.
Yes. To keep the the formula used to be entertain the kids, teach the kids and entertain the adults, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like
program the kids.
That's right. But the colors and the shapes of the animals and stuff like that keep the attention for the kids. But the humor is for the adult. Look at the Animaniacs. That's for adults. I'm sorry.
South Park. That's not for kids.
I don't like South Park, actually.
Animaniacs was a great show. I think they're bringing it back, but I'm not confident it's going to like
they were
run or anything.
When they
Daniel
first came out.
Bickleberry.
When they first came out with the Animaniacs and Warner Brothers and stuff like that, they were doing takeoffs on old movies. Like I can't remember which one it was, but they did Apocalypse Now with Porky Pig. The whole. It was fucking hilarious. But a kid wouldn't know the storyline of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
But they did it. Look at what is it, the barbershop of whatever, the Bugs Bunny or whatever it was, DeVille.
The Barber of
DeVille or something. Or what was it called? Yeah, I know you're part. Yeah.
And that was that, and that's probably one of Bugs Bunny's most famous clips. But you don't see stuff like that. No more Tom and Jerry. I don't think the Flintstones are even allowed to be on the air anymore. I don't know.
Flintstones those characters used to promote cigarettes, right? You'd have Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone smoking. Hey, kids, Marlboro.
Even the
way
Jetsons.
To go after a long day in the rock factory or whatever. Right?
The Beverly Hillbillies, when they first come out, they were sponsored by tobacco and Kellogg's.
They all were back then. Beverly Hills Billies, even
I think
the Dick Van Dyke Show had sponsors that were cigarettes.
I think it was Winston cigarettes. The
then,
cool,
probably.
mild flavor of Winston cigarettes.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you listen to all the old TV ads and stuff like that. There was soap, cigarettes, booze, cars.
You also got to remember this was a time when 4 out of 5 doctors recommended Camel cigarettes or smoked Camel cigarettes. All right.
Well, yeah, that was then. This is now.
That just told me that 4 out of the 5 doctors didn't have very good taste back then.
Tobacco's got. I'm not tobacco's another kind of indigenous herb that we sort of ruined, really, right? Tobacco's got a lot of spiritual and sacred use for indigenous people across North America, but the version of tobacco, the strain that we use is a different variety than that was more popular with them, and we've kind of commercialized it, changed it, and altered it into something that it was not originally, and then we try to ban it, right? And
added a whole bunch of chemicals to it is what we did.
Yeah, I would like to see. I think I see these ads like a tobacco cigarette contains all these different things. I'm like, well, can't you make a rule that you can't put some of that stuff into your cigarette? Wouldn't that be better than just putting out warnings? Like, I'm all for regulating safety of things or at least giving people options and stuff, right? And seems weird to me that we sort of allow. And there's interesting stuff about, I won't get into it too much, but about
Canadians,
the potential radioactivity of tobacco products that could be some of the harm involved.
Yeah, but Canadians can legally grow their own tobacco, up to 15 kilograms of dried tobacco per 18-year-old per household.
Really?
I know. I wish that was the rule for cannabis, right?
Yeah, it would be a perfect rule for cannabis because essentially it's the same process. You grow the plant, harvest the plant, dry the plant, cure the plant.
Yeah, cannabis is easier than tobacco, I think. It's not so much maybe the growing, but the processing. Tobacco leaves, you've got to dry them and cure them and do a bunch of stuff. Whereas
and then you got to shred them.
You just got to dry them out. They're good to go, right? But no, I think there shouldn't really be any limit. But there was a 15 kilo per person per year limit. I don't think anybody would be complaining too much about that limit. And it's per adult in your household, like you said. So a married couple with a kid over 18, that's 45 kilos you'd be able to grow every year, right?
But yet you can only grow 4 plants without going through. I went and did my first grow this year. Okay. But I didn't get my ticket in until 2 weeks before I pulled my plants. Okay, and I took a chance, and I'll say that. I took a chance, and I put my plants out more than the 4 because it's my medicine, right? And I've been licensed before, so, you want to take that argument, you go right ahead, officer. But
And nobody cared, right? I mean,
yeah, nobody
really,
cared.
You get a busybody neighbor or something.
I cared, though.
One person will get hit by it. But if you want to grow 5 or 6 plants,
yeah, but I cared though, because they put me through several months. I put my stuff in April, and they could have asked me questions on the forms that they didn't ask, and then they requested stuff that they could have asked months and months before that. And then 2 weeks before I'm harvesting, I get my license. Does that protect me? Yes, it protects me now with what I've got, but and sure. It's great for next year when I start. But still, come on now, a little bit ridiculous on that.
But really, you know what? Nobody's going to care unless somebody complains.
That's right. That's right.
Although I will say there are like with these rules they put in, like here in British Columbia, the government put a rule in that no one's allowed to see your 4 plants. So if somebody can see one of your plants from a public place, like if you're growing it on your balcony or in a window, someone walks by on the street and they can see your plant, you can be fined several $1,000s and go to jail for a couple of months.
Wow.
And if it happens a second time, the penalties can double. And so, like, now you think, okay, well, most people aren't going to call the cops if they see a pot leaf sticking out my window or whatever. But we had a thing last year where a couple in a town in British Columbia, they have an annual garden art party where, like, different people in the community open up their gardens, local artists bring their art, and they hang it, they display their beautiful gardens and their art. And one couple did this, and they had their 4 legal marijuana plants growing in their yard. And when the community comes through to look at all of them, one of them was an off-duty cop, and he said, well, you're displaying this for the public. I can see it now. So you broke the law. You got a warrant. And then like a week later, this couple comes home and there's cop cars in their driveway. They're searching their house, going through all this stuff, hacking down the pot plants that were only visible because they invited people onto their property for this community event. And it created a big brouhaha, but that's like, so like, it doesn't happen a lot, but then the odd one person gets stuck with this stupid thing because some cop or some asshole decides to cause problems,
that's
right?
Petty.
And it's like, why do you put a law in that no one really cares about that's only going to get certain people or marginalized people? I've got a big fence around my yard. A lot of people live in apartments or don't have fences in their backyard or don't have a fucking backyard, right?
I see.
So they can't grow cannabis.
I'm in an apartment.
All these people
I'm in an apartment in North York, in a very, very heavy traffic area, and in the summertime you can walk down the pathway and see plants poking out from balconies. Great. You walk through my building, you smell turkey and you smell weed in this building. Okay. And that's fine. I love it. I love it here. But there are some buildings like my mom's condo. Ooh, boy, did we get in some trouble. My mom started using cannabis and they came knocking on the fucking door.
I've had that. I've been in apartments where you're allowed to smoke tobacco, and you
cannabis.
You smell
nope.
people cooking food. You can smell curry and other stuff, and that's part of urban life, right? Yep. You get in the elevator, someone just got in and sprayed perfume all over.
I catch my neighbor across the hall spraying my doorway frame all the time with spray.
And then you get a bit of cannabis smell, and right when legalization was happening in Canada, a whole bunch of places, including some cities like Halifax, and a whole bunch of apartment complexes that had always allowed tobacco use, suddenly banned tobacco use just because they wanted to ban marijuana, and they knew they couldn't just ban marijuana and allow tobacco because they'd get called out as the hypocrites they are. And there's definitely places you shouldn't be able to smoke marijuana. I got no problem with that. But if you've been allowing tobacco smoke since forever, and now you're just banning it because you don't like weed smoke, then that is a terrible policy, and that's terrible. I mean, people what they want, but personally, cannabis smoke smells wonderful.
I love it. My mom loved it too.
And in its raw form too, it's like such a beautiful smelling plant. And I think a lot of people who don't like it, it's more just because they are biased against it than because it innately smells bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's certainly, parts of the agricultural areas where it smells like manure for hours of driving, and that's just part of life living on a farm or whatever, right?
Yep.
And like people who don't like the marijuana smell, but the manure smell is fine. Like, come
the
on,
cows down the road like it.
Nothing intrinsically bad about cannabis smell.
Exactly.
Even it's a pleasant odor, really.
We used to have when I was living at my mom's place. I literally, I'd go out with a friend for a doobie or something, and we would literally have security following us around the building. Just around the outskirts of the building. And this is right at Merton and Mount Pleasant. So, it's a very high traffic area. Where else are you supposed to go but to the park? You know what I mean? But yet you got security firing. Now, it's not so bad now. I don't have anything to do with the building anymore, but this building here is okay. I hope that more buildings will be more accepting, because I've got friends who got kicked out of their buildings because of cannabis, right? Because
That's terrible.
Because of their cannabis use. Yeah.
And especially, for anybody, but especially if you're a medical user, that's really harsh to be made homeless or don't have a place to live because you need to inhale this stuff. But even if you're not, it's still a ridiculous situation.
So listen, I want you to tell people, because we're getting near the end of the show here, I want you to tell people where they can find you, where they can get information, all your different places that they can go. I know you have one central place.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Well, my main website is my name, DanaLarsen.com. My last name is Larsen, so DanaLarsen.com. But you can go to getyourdrugstested.com to learn about our drug testing program, see those results. CannabisDispensary.ca is our cannabis dispensary. We do mail order across Canada. MushroomDispensary.com. I can't believe that URL wasn't taken yet, but that's for our mushroom dispensary. We do mail order across Canada.
Really?
CocaLeafCafe.com is the cafe that we do here. My headphone just died there. I hope you can still hear me.
Yes.
I switched to my computer microphone now. So we have good timing there. And also I write books. I wrote a funny book called Harry Pothead and the Marijuana Stone, and
that's right.
A few other books, The Pie-Eyed Piper, and just got a new one called Sinbad the Strain Hunter, Voyage to Noedia. My books are available at potheadbooks.com.
Yeah.
And I think that's all my sites, but if I miss something, DanaLarsen.com is where you can find me.
I actually have Green Buds and Hash loaded up from YouTube. It's voiced. We're going to play that out when we go. Just because I was listening to it and I was like, yeah, it makes sense.
It's that book was a lot of fun. People really liked the parody, and
I had a copy of it. Somebody stole it from the lounge. I had a copy and I brought it to the lounge, and somebody stole it.
So. Copies of all my books afterwards. I'm more than happy to get them out there to people. I really want people just to enjoy them. I mean, we don't really a lot of the books, but it's fun to have them out there, and I'm happy to share them out. And there you go. That's all my stuff. Thanks so much for having me. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to all you guys, and I think we all have shared and learned a few things. And
I know I did.
Oh,
and kudos on that drug testing. I think that's just such a great service.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad we're able to offer it.
I'm looking at some of the results on this, and one of them was it was sold as oxycodone, and the results were microcrystalline cellulose, caffeine, and an uncertain oil, and positive for fentanyl.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Caffeine, we actually see a lot of. It's a very common mixer, and a lot of things that are sold as some kind of other opioid. It's just like they put some fentanyl in there with some caffeine, and here's your oxycodone, here's your heroin, here's your whatever, right? But it's just like it's all this fentanyl and caffeine.
But the wrong combinations that happen can kill people.
Absolutely. Or even
mannitol and caffeine and a little bit of fentanyl.
Caffeine is weirdly the most common, it's the most commonly used legal drug, and it's also the most commonly used illegal drug in the sense that it is cut in with so many other things, right? So we see it in cocaine, we see it mixed with MDMA, we see it mixed with opioids like fentanyl and heroin. It's a very common cut for heroin too. It's the most common cutting drug out there is caffeine, which is just kind of an interesting phenomenon. They're just buying huge amounts of powdered caffeine and circulating it through the illicit drug market.
I last year when I fucked my shoulder up, I had not ever had a situation in my life where I had to have some pain relief that was an opiate. And they tried me on the morphine, the low dose of the morphine, right? It didn't do nothing. But the perks did. And now I can honestly say that I understand. I felt great. I had a prescription, and I used it the way it was directed. and I felt great. They made me feel better, so I can understand why somebody wants. I want to keep feeling like that, and then you take more, and then more, and more, and more, and it snowballs.
Yeah, that can be an issue, and sometimes people get injured and they're not able to get it. Also, just think about like being homeless. You're going to be in pain a lot of the time when you're sleeping in a sleeping bag or a blanket on the sidewalk. You're going to be in pain a lot more than other people who have nice, comfy beds and warm homes to sleep in. And like we think of drug use as sometimes it's an irrational thing, but it's a very rational decision to want to ease your pain. And sometimes if your pain is extreme, pain can really fuck you up, right? Extreme pain makes people do crazy. And if someone says it might kill you, but it might take away your pain for a while, there's a point where like you're going to go, okay, because I can't live like this any longer. This has brought me relief. Now I feel better, right? And withdrawal brings its own pain and can create a cycle of dependence.
Creates a snowball.
But a lot of drug use,
most opiate no one grows up to be any sort of addict. Like that's not their goal in life. But most
people can grow up to be addicted, though. Have an addictive personality, though.
No, there's genetics for that. Don't get me wrong, but most people get on opiates because of
pain,
an injury, an accident. It starts out prescribed. It's whatever, right? So it's easy to happen, and eventually the problem with opiates is it's A, the tolerance goes up. B, opiates are technically pro-inflammatory, so they're actually going to cause more disease progression in the long run. And secondly, once you start getting those receptors all accustomed to it, it's the sickness.
But it's not just the pain.
They're not always looking to get high anymore. It's just they don't want to be sick.
It's not always the pain meds too. My mom got hooked to Ritalin bad, to the point where it put her in the hospital. And that happens.
Basically, cocaine, in my opinion.
But the Ritalin thing is happening with a lot of seniors now, right? Which is sad.
Trust me, it's everybody.
I know. I grew up on it. I was on it from the age of 5 to 16 years old, and I tried it again as an adult, and I was like, okay, no, I don't want to do this.
Stimulants are the drug abuse today. It's not even the opiates anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that are out there, and what you define as use and abuse can really sort of depend on your personal perspective too, right? Like,
if you have an addictive personality, you're going to end up getting addicted to something if you're not careful.
Okay. But I guess the difference is that if you get addicted to coffee, which many people are, I would say, if you took away their coffee, a lot of people wouldn't bother them. A lot of people would go to extremes to get that. And coffee withdrawal can be quite intense.
Cigarettes as well.
Coffee, they don't end up being homeless. They don't end up having to inject caffeine because coffee is readily available in a mild form. And it's easier.
Exactly.
I used to drink a lot of coffee. When I quit cold turkey, it was really hard. I felt like a spike was being driven into my head. I went back to drinking coffee, several times. It took quite a bit of effort. But I didn't have to like lose my dignity or my life or go to something just because it's a more accepted aspect of our society.
But other things that does happen.
A lot of people who are even so-called heroin addicts, if they survive and live long enough, the vast majority spontaneously quit using opiates at some point. Like most people who use, if they typically on their own. If they survive it long enough, if they don't get killed by fentanyl or whatever, they end up quitting on their own eventually. It's very common to see that happen. They age out of it. And so when we think of addiction and stuff, our perception often is kind of limited, in terms of how we look at things and what we think of as addictiveness or, and dependency and addiction are mixed up things, but they're different, right?
Yeah.
You can be dependent on insulin. You stop taking it, you're going to have problems.
Yep.
You're not an insulin addict. And but there's something there, right? And with opioids and that, the withdrawal is kind of the dependency, but there's also the psychological aspect.
Same thing.
There's a lot of stuff going on. People come to me for my microdose saying, I'm smoking too much marijuana. I've got a marijuana addiction, and I have trouble. And we think, marijuana addict, whatever, of course, that's silly. But no, if you are struggling with your own use and trying not to use it in certain contexts, that's like an issue, right? And
you can be addicted to anything.
I see CBD, less THC, but microdosing can also help you modulate your cannabis use.
Yeah, it does. I don't smoke as much.
But cannabis withdrawal symptoms are quite mild, right?
Yes.
So they do exist. If you're a heavy cannabis user and you stop, you're going to dream more. People report weird dreams, trouble sleeping, might be cranky, but they're not as bad as the withdrawal symptoms from like a heavy alcohol user or a heavy opiate user. Those withdrawal symptoms are way more intense.
Remember the last time I had a hangover.
Habit forming is kind of what we call addiction, right? Those two things kind of intertwined when there's a psychological aspect and a physical aspect together. That can be a very difficult thing to deal with, right? But prohibition makes it harder and harder to deal with.
One of the things I learned when I quit smoking, and I started smoking when I was 14 years old, and it's been about 15 years now since I quit. Well, maybe 10, but one of the things that I was told by my doctor, it's not the fact that you're shoving a cigarette in your mouth every 5 minutes. It's usually the action, because that action becomes a calming, right? It's that whole repetitiveness, that whole culture of of smoking a cigarette, right? And I mean, I used to love having an Export A green with a glass of cold milk. The flavors were just something I really enjoyed, but now it makes me gag, So I guess that whole in age thing happens with cigarettes as well, because I did that on my own. I had to. I got to the point where I couldn't breathe. Now I smoke a lot of cannabis, but it's different.
Weirdly, there's been studies and stuff when you give heroin addicts heroin or like sell it to them in proper dosages at regular times, a lot of them will end up quit using heroin in the long run, way more than if they're not, because because you're able to, like, if you're really focused on this substance, then you're only thinking an hour or two ahead. You're like, okay, I'm good now, but in 3 hours I'm going to be going through withdrawal symptoms, so I got to get enough money right away to go get this drug, so I don't, and I can't have too much on me, or if I get busted, they're going to take it all away. So I got to keep going, get little bits all the time, and you all become focused on the next couple of hours. So you make very short-term decisions, right? I'm going to break
a lot of people I know who are patients. A lot of people who I know are patients. They start worrying. Like, I even start worrying. I'm running out. I got to make sure I have my medicine, and it's a valid reaction. But it's not an addiction thing. It's just I need my medicine. If I don't have my metformin in the morning, I feel like crap in the afternoon. It's the same thing.
Yeah, that's like a dependency that you need that. But when you don't have to start, when okay, I'm able to go back to this place and get my dose, you can stop thinking 2 hours ahead. You can start thinking 2 days ahead, and 2 weeks ahead, a few months ahead.
Mushrooms help me regulate that.
Often people are able to make better decisions about their use and modulate their use, and maybe they don't, they get other things going on, right? But this pattern of I need more, I gotta, like, that can become something that persists for a very long time, and it's very hard to break out of.
Most people that I know that are that were, as your everyday smoker, in the habit of smoking an ounce or two every day, when they realize that, okay, well, this, I don't need that much. Like, I went nuts when I got my license. I can smoke as much as I want, and now I'm just like, I have it when I need it, and if I don't need it, if I'm out and about, I'm not walking around like a cigarette in my mouth all the time. Although I do have my Shatterizer with me all the time, I have to say that. But do you understand what I mean? Like, I have learned to regulate myself.
Given more options, people will generally tend to use things in the more safer way, in the more milder way. Not everybody, and when you have a culture that, like, encourages that and reinforces that, and not a culture of, like, with alcohol, like, there's the binge drinking concept. Now you're 19 or you're 21 or whatever, you better go get as fucked up as you can on booze. And then there's I've been having a bit of wine with my dinner since I was 10 or 8, and it's not a big deal. And people still might have alcohol issues, but, like, you're more able to, like, it's more, you understand using smaller amounts in different kind of context.
Well, that's the thing. Food. My friends come over and they see this big jar of mushrooms sitting on my shelf, and they're like, "That's really cool, man. Do you do that much?" No. I mean, I've had that for 6 months. I just use this much, and people don't get that, right?
Well, and I think even with psychedelics, I mean, I'm not against people who want to do big heroic dosages, but really a lot of the research shows that there's a sweet spot. Usually it's around 1 to 3 grams of mushrooms. When you get to dosages over 5 grams of dried mushrooms,
You're kind of wasting.
When you tend to, like, people reporting the benefits, they don't really report more benefits or more insights or more enlightenment, but they do report more fear, more confusion, more anxiety. And so if you want to do big dosages, like, be my guest. But
that's exactly what I don't want.
There's that spot where you get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
You can maximize the benefits and minimize the negatives, and that's what you want out of life, right? And same with alcohol. You want to drink. If you're drinking alcohol, I don't really drink a lot, but if you do, you want to find the amount where you get a nice feeling, but not so much that you're throwing up and staggering around and driving your car into a pole, right? And like with cannabis, I don't like really eating edibles very often because they can get me way higher than I want to be. And I use tons of marijuana, but I'm smoking it, so I'm getting to a place where I want to be. Eating it can be infinitely stronger than smoking it. If you eat the right dosages, you can, go to some pretty psychedelic spaces with cannabis from large dosages.
Oh yeah, right? I've had some experiences.
Well, now I'm going to eat as many edibles as I can get so high. No, after legalization, the most popular growth thing is CBD, the stuff that barely has a psychoactive effect, but it's not. That becomes the most popular thing. And like I said, I'm not against the big dosages if that's what you want, but vast majority of people do not want that experience. They want something more mild and more accessible and more friendly. And in that range,
most people just want 1 or 2 beers as well, not a case. So
exactly. And sometimes with alcoholism, they got to be abstinent. But I think abstinence only is not always the best model. And a lot of times, it's more about how to modulate your use and how to change your relationship with this substance. And that a lot of our stuff, like I said, if you want to be abstinent, that's fine, right? But it's like, and if you want to be abstinent from other things, you don't have sex or whatever, that's fine too. But really, drug use is normal. And understanding how to do it responsibly, how to use the substances beneficially, how to get the most out of it, to max, like we talk about a harm reduction. The other side of harm reduction is benefit maximization. And drugs can have harms, but we don't really talk about the benefits of these things, and they all have incredible benefits, which is why people use them. And really a good drug policy should reduce the harm and maximize the benefits of different substances. And you need different rules. You need different rules around LSD, or at least different protocols around LSD use as you do around cannabis, and you do around cocaine or heroin or coca-tea or whatever, right? Like you need different kind of societal structures and best practices on how to use these things. But we should be teaching more about responsible use and how to do it safely and properly. And you can say about sex too, right? We can say don't have sex till you're married, and that's it. And then only, but no, and if you want to do that, hey, that's fine, and maybe that's the safest course. But we know you're probably not going to do that. So let's make condoms available. Let's teach people how to have sex in a respectful and responsible and safe way.
They don't even do that anymore. They don't. We had sex ed when we were in school.
I don't mean you don't be abstinent if you choose it, but that's the better way of getting better outcomes, right? We know that abstinence-only models makes more teen pregnancies, makes people have more STDs, creates more problems, and that awareness and responsibility and teaching people how to communicate and how to do it means less of all these things. And you'd think, well, if we put condom machines, there's going to be more pregnancies happening. No, it's less things happen, more responsibility happens. So I see like a really strong parallel there between like drug use and sexuality and other things that we try to prohibit. But hey, we were about to finish, and now we got into a whole other massive conversation here. But
quite all right. Happens every time.
How long that I can drink? I'll get some coca-tea. We can do another 2 hours if you want.
Sure. Another time.
Yeah.
No, I think something on the team.
I just got to get some coca-tea when Darcy's making hash during the week.
Why does he take too long?
I'm trying to get a dig at him. I don't know if he heard me.
He heard you.
Yes, I heard you. Hey, I only bugged you for a couple weeks to get a new freeze dryer, and I got that yesterday. So now the volume will flow.
So listen, guys, I wanna play out with this green buds and hash. and say goodnight to Dana. And Dana, it's always a pleasure having you here. You just wind you up and let you go. It's always nice to hear you chatting about stuff that you're so passionate about, man.
A lot to talk about, and we got through a ton of it today. And I said, thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed being on and talking with you guys.
Yeah,
and
we'll do it again soon.
And we'll talk some more one day.
We'll do it again soon. So, what?
A given.
Yep. So this is, as I said, I'm sure Dana doesn't want to sit and listen to this again. This is Green Buds and Hash by Dana Larsen, and there is a book available. You can get it on Dana's site. This is just the voiced version I found on Facebook. Don't even know.
I do got to cut out one, guys.
Doing that. Okay.
So do I.
And so I'm going to let it play, and
Very
then
nice
we'll wind up.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for listening.
Green Buds and Hash, written by Dana Larsen. Would you like green buds and hash? No, I would not, Mr. Stash. Would you like them in a bong? Would you like them all day long? No, I would not in a bong. I would not all day long. I do not like buds and hash. I do not want them, Mr. Stash. Would you like them wrapped in paper? Would you try them now or later? I do not want them wrapped in paper. I do not want them now or later. I do not want them in a bong. I do not want them all day long. I do not like buds and hash. I do not want them, Mr. Stash.
Would you like them in a joint?
No, I would not. What's the point?
Perhaps you would puff. Just have one. That is enough.
I won't partake, not of a puff, nor hit off.
Would you try tiny toke?
No, I would not want any smoke.
What if they were vaporized?
I've told you no 1,000 times.
Could you in a cake? Or in cookies I can bake?
I do not want them in a cake or in cookies you could bake. I do not want them vaporized or other means you have devised. I do not wish to try a coke, otherwise inhale smoke. I won't participate in puffs. You have asked me quite enough. I get no joy from using joints. I really don't see the point. I do not want to use the bong. I think buds and hash are wrong.
In that tincture, would you take it? I could show you how to make it.
I do not want them in a tincture or any other mixture. I do not want buds and hash. I do not want them, Mr. Stash. Why do you care if I try them? Will you profit if I buy them?
I offer buds and hash for free. There is no benefit to me. Someone said that you were sick.
Green buds and hash might do the trick.
If you find you're getting thinner with no appetite for dinner, or you suffer from scoliosis, epilepsy, or neurosis,
or almost all the ills that area, buds and hash will never fail you.
Have glaucoma,
PMS, green buds and hash have much success.
For protection against strokes,
it's best to have some potent tokes.
If your muscles are not dandy, try some green bud-infused candy. For migraine, spasms, even cancer, green buds and hash provide the answer. If you're not feeling right, then have green buds and hash tonight.
It's true. I'm not feeling great. My health's been rather poor of late. My doctor says that I have ills. He told me I should take these pills. I cannot even sleep at night. I never do quite feel all right. I will try green buds and hash. I will try them, Mr. Stash. Oh, hey. Now I'm feeling good. They work just like you said they would. I have never felt this fine. Green buds and hash are quite fine. I will bake a green bud brownie whenever I'm feeling frowny. I will take them vaporized. That technique seems very wise. I will take them in a tincture and in every other mixture. Perhaps I would prefer to puff and stop when I've had enough. I will roll some massive joints and smoke them down to little points. I will toke up on the bong. I will do it all day long. I really like green buds and hash. I do enjoy them, Mr. Stash. Thanks for being so insistent and for being so persistent. My mind and body are improved. My spirit has also been moved. Though I was told the sin, green buds and hash are medicine. I'm sorry that I was so hateful. Now I know I should be grateful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stash. Thank you for green buds and hash.
So what are you doing?
Nothing. Why not? Trying to get on this lifestyle radio
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organization or lifestyle radio.
Hey, this is